Good evening, everybody. I am Greg Hooksma, Chair of the Gig Harbor Planning Commission. Welcome to this evening's meeting. It is 6 p.m. on April 7th. This evening's meeting will involve a public hearing. When it comes time for the public comment period, I will give instructions so that anyone that is attending via Zoom and wishes to comment will be able to. I would note also for the record, well, I guess we can do that later. First, I'd like to do a roll call. Commissioner Soltis.
Here.
Commissioner Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Krozik.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Bradbury.
Here.
And from the city staff, we have Carl DeSimas and Michelle Thomas. Welcome to both of you as well.
Thank you.
So first order of business is approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Are there any comments or corrections on those minutes? Looks like there are none. Given that, I am willing to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
And second to the motion. Okay, motion has been moved and seconded. Any discussion about the minutes? None. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
That's a unanimous aye. The motion passes. Okay. So our single topic for this evening is again a public hearing about proposed regulations pertaining to transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, emergency shelters, and emergency housing. And I will turn it over to you, Carl, for the staff report.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, members of Planning Commission and members of the public, if any are in attendance. This is, of course, a public hearing for, as you stated, Chair, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, emergency shelter, and emergency housing. And this is relative to the permanent zoning regulations that would replace Ordinance 1466 that was passed last year by the council in response to engrossed second substitute House Bill 1220, which was signed by the governor on May 12th, 2021. And as you all are aware, that bill was passed in part to address the growing homeless crisis that Washington State is currently facing. The bill had a number of sections within it that we attempted to break down for the Planning Commission and for the public in the staff memo here for tonight. And I won't belabor each of the sections too much, but the section that probably bears the most focus or deserves the most focus is section 3 and section 5. And so section 3 essentially states that a code city cannot prohibit the transitional housing or permanent supportive housing in any zones in which residential dwelling units or hotels are allowed. And as well, the code city shall not prohibit indoor emergency shelters and indoor emergency housing in any zones which hotels are allowed. And those requirements became effective September 30th, 2021. And the bill does allow jurisdictions to place some reasonable occupancy, spacing, and intensity of use requirements upon those uses. And that's what's been proposed in this ordinance and what we've reviewed in the past. I will move into the discussion from there. As you all are aware, the City Council passed Ordinance 1466 in September of 2021, and that provided interim zoning controls, which the bill also allowed for the cities and jurisdictions to do. We also amended the use table in Chapter 1714 to be consistent with that bill. So in other words, to allow those 4 uses within certain zones within the city. And as you know, those were all included as conditional uses in those zones. The the interim regulations were in place for a period of 6 months. And there was a hearing held on October 11th, 2021, after that was adopted in consistent with state law. And the Planning Commission actually held a hearing on February 17th, 2022, as you're all aware. But we received comments from the Department of Commerce in the interim, which prompted us to come back, Planning Commission to come back, meet again, and consider those comments from Commerce, which we did on March 17th, 2022. So that leads us up to conducting another public hearing tonight on April 7th in order to consider changes that the Planning Commission proposed and directed staff to make on that March 17th meeting. And then it should be noted that in the interim here, the 6-month interim controls, zoning controls ran out. We ran out of time on those. So we needed to extend them, and the council did extend those controls for another 6 months on March 28th, 2022. And that was via ordinance number 1483. So in response to that letter from Commerce, as I stated, the Planning Commission asked staff to go back and make a couple of changes to the ordinance that we had presented to you back on March 2nd. And so staff went back, made those changes, or at least attempted to make those changes based on what we heard from you. And we incorporated those into the ordinance that that was put out in your packets and also put out to the public as ordinance XXXX in draft form. And so this evening, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission consider any public comment that is provided. There were no written comments provided. And so we, other than the Commerce comment. And then deliberate on what changes staff has proposed in the ordinance, and then potentially make a recommendation. And with that, Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the commissioners on or questions for Carl before we open the public hearing? Okay. All right, I know that there are a couple folks in attendance here, and thank you very much for attending. Comments are going to be allowed here in just a moment. Your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number will be called out when it is your turn to speak. If you're using your phone to call in, you may need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Otherwise, you press the raise hand button near the bottom of your Zoom window or press *9 on your phone. All speakers will have up to 3 minutes to speak. After you're identified and requested to speak, please state your name and your address. And then your 3-minute time will begin as soon as you are done giving us that information. At the 3-minute mark, Michelle Thomas from the city will turn your microphone off, and to keep within those time limits. And just before we do that, I would just want to say for the record, I am not aware that we have received any written comments for this public hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was no public comments received.
Okay. All right, I will open the floor for comments from the public. And I see that we have 3 attendees. And I will give you another few seconds to decide if you'd like to raise your hand and comment. Just to make sure everyone has figured out how to raise their hand if they want to. Okay. Well, I don't see anyone raising their hand, expressing a desire to speak, so I am closing the public comment period at 6:10 PM. And I will throw it back out to the, hold on a second. Someone just asked a question in the chat room.
I
And that-
had disabled that. I'm not sure how that happened. The recording will be available online tomorrow afternoon.
And now I do see a hand raise
I don't see any hands.
okay. All right. So I'll turn it back over and open the floor for the commissioners to for discussion or comment. And just for the public's information, we did discuss this at a considerable length at our previous meeting and considered the input from the Department of Commerce and their letter. And I guess I would want the commissioners just to be comfortable with the changes that the staff made and make sure you don't have any questions or comments about that.
And Chair, if I could just jump in and state that I'd forgotten to state in my report that the changes that were made from the March 2nd meeting in the ordinance number XXXX are those that are red and underlined, with the exception of attachment A, which is the use matrix in table, the land use matrix for 1714-020. Those red and underlined changes were what was in the original, what you had originally reviewed. I made no changes to those.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, well, it looks like everyone seems to be comfortable with the good work that you've done, making the changes that we recommended. So given that, let's move on to the next agenda item. And that is other business.
Chair, does the commission want to make a recommendation this evening? Or would the commission be comfortable making a recommendation this evening?
Yeah, good point. So does that need to come in the form of a motion, or do we just need to have consensus that we want to put this forward?
It should come in the form of a motion and be voted on for directing staff to draft the recommendation and for your signature to
Okay.
move the ordinance XXXX as presented this evening forward to council for their consideration.
Okay,
So move. Second.
okay, we've had a motion and a second. The floor is open for any discussion on that motion. Hearing none, all those in the favor of the motion say aye.
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 That looks like that motion passes unanimously. Okay, thanks for that, Carl. I get a little ahead of myself there. Good to have you here to keep me in line.
And Michelle keeping us all in line, so.
Okay. Now moving on to other business. I'll let you address that, Carl.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we will be revisiting short-term rentals on April 21st. So we will have those packets and materials ready for you on April 14th. And Chair, I wanted to just put this out there, depending on how the discussion goes on the 21st, and we can on the 21st, and we could discuss this at the meeting on the 21st, and commissioners could direct staff whichever way they feel is most appropriate. But staff was considering if we got to a point in the meeting on the 21st, we were considering potentially proposing having another meeting on the 28th. We haven't had design review board. We don't have any design review board meetings upcoming. And that would give us another study session. And the reason being that the city council would like us to, if at all possible, try and bring this to bring an ordinance to them for first reading in June. So, that of course is not a directive to planning commission by any means, but that's their request. And so I am passing along that request, and that's staff's charge is to try and get that done if possible.
Okay. Well, we've had a couple of long meetings, but tonight's is pretty short. So we got a little breathing space tonight. What do y'all feel about that?
I'm available to meet on the 28th.
I'm not available on the 28th.
I'd have to call in like Carl did tonight, but I'm willing to do that.
Okay.
I can accommodate that.
I'm available on the 28th.
Okay, and so am I, and so that would at least give us a quorum, even not knowing yet if Commissioner Greina could attend. And Carl and I had a discussion just about how we're, our strategy for the next meeting with respect to the STR and how we're going to approach that. We're going to, do it slightly differently so we can, we're going to focus on decision making. And he's done some work on, clarifying some of those questions that we had. I just feel like we got a little bogged down in lawyering, not lawyering, but the mumbo jumbo of the implications of certain words and anyway, so the point being, I think we're going to have a more efficient meeting, a more productive meeting, a more satisfying meeting, while also, doing the work that we need to do on behalf of the city and the citizens of Gig Harbor.
And Chair, we could wait till the 21st to make the call on whether or not we want to meet again on the 28th, depending on how that meeting goes. We would just have to, if we decided to go that route, we would have to post that agenda right after the meeting, essentially. I think, Michelle, would we still be?
That was 2 or 3 days for special meetings.
Oh, that's right. Thank you very much. That's right. We do have, so we could call a special meeting. So we can make that call on the 21st, and then we could post the agenda as long as it's 3 days prior for a special meeting, because that would be considered a special meeting. We would just have to make it known at the meeting on the 21st.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So in preparation for the meeting on the 21st, in addition, what you're going to see is I would just ask you all to go through the documents that we've already had, the input, the questions that were asked by all the different commissioners, and be prepared to, laser focus in on, do we want X, have a discussion, answer the question, move on to the next question. Do we want this in the ordinance? Be able to discuss it quickly and meaningfully. So if you can do that homework, then I think that'll help as well.
And I'd like to just say, Commissioner Soltis, we did receive what you had provided via email, and we will include that in the packet when it all goes out on the 14th for other commissioners to consider.
Carl, can we expect a fleshed out short-term rental ordinance, or are you I guess I'm trying to figure out how far can you get on by the 21st in terms of a reviewable document? I know we got a lot of decisions to make, but we need some meat to feel like I think we need meat to feel like we're making progress. So I don't know where you're gonna go. Are you gonna give the questions out on the 21st? We're gonna do those decisions, then you're gonna have a week to go write it up. That may not be enough time.
It's a good question, Commissioner Soltis, and I think the idea would be to try and flesh out and answer as many of those questions that came up in our last session as possible. You know, the big overarching questions that we kind of ran up against, and then we could use the 28th if we don't get all the way through them, if we don't get it all fleshed out, and then the idea would be to for the following meeting, whichever that ends up being, we would then bring back a draft ordinance for your consideration, and then we would have a hearing at the following meeting after that. So I think it's looking like, you know, maybe 3 to 4 more meetings before we actually get it to the planning commission, or sorry, to the council.
Wow.
But I think in answer to your question, I think we do need to answer. We need to come up with some solid and concrete answers on a couple of those overarching questions that commissioners had at the last meeting that we kind of got bogged down on.
In addition to all the questions we never got to. So it's really kind of a different strategy to, you know, answer all these questions, and then that'll make it a whole lot easier for the staff to write the ordinance. And it just didn't work out so well the other way around.
Chair, I see Commissioner Brown has his hand up as well.
Sure.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. First, we talked a little bit about a document called the Good Neighbor Policy. And what I wanted to ask you, Carl, is that something that needs to be in the ordinance, or could that be something that could be provided as part of the licensing process?
Carl,
Commissioner-
Carl, could I just interrupt a little bit? I think so far our discussion has been how we're going to approach the discussion. I don't want to get into actual discussion about short-term rentals because it's not on the agenda. So I think we're wandering into that area, and I'm not sure that that's appropriate.
I agree, Chair. I don't think we want to get into actual discussion about the details of that ordinance because it wasn't advertised on the agenda. But Commissioner Brown, if you'd like to send me that your question via email and copy the chair on that and Michelle, then we could certainly answer the question, and then we could bring the question and answer to the rest of the commissioners at the meeting on the 21st.
So, second, give me another at bat here.
Sure.
Struck out on the first one. Do we have a sense of the provisions or segments of the ordinance that are not yet defined? And the reason I ask is I would like to advocate that we see if any of the commissioners would like to address these between now and the next meeting, so that we've got a draft that we can circulate in advance and be that much further along when we next gather on the 21st. I'd certainly be willing to do that if I knew which of the terms and conditions need to be addressed with a straw man sort of a draft. Is that clear?
I'm not sure I follow the question exactly, Commissioner Brown. If you could, and maybe some other commissioners got it and could fill in.
Well, hey, if I could chime in there, I think for me, Tom, like, for example, I submitted a list of probably 15 questions that I thought that we needed to answer. And without the answers to those questions, it would be futile to make an attempt to draft even a part of the ordinance because we need to have a consensus and an opinion from all the commission about the answer to, the questions that I had and the questions that other people raised. And so, my idea is that once we answer those questions, then the ordinance kind of writes itself because, do you want 1,000-foot separation? Yes, we do. Okay, it goes in the ordinance. Do you want, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the strategy that I have in mind.
Thank you.
Commissioner Krosik?
Yeah, I agree with you, Greg, that I think what we're really looking at here is more of policy questions is what do we want our policies with regard to a short-term rental ordinance to be rather than specifically trying to write the ordinance. So I think you're right on in terms of what you just said there.
Okay, thanks. Okay, and Commissioner Grina, thank you for joining us. I know that you had another commitment that was important, and so we thank you for hopping on. There was a question that came up that Carl proposed a potential extra meeting on the 28th of April, and just wondered if you might be available if we find that a meeting on that night is necessary.
Hang on a second. You can go ahead and talk about something else and I'll chime in when I've got my calendar here.
Well, I think we're just about ready to close the meeting.
Oh, okay.
So take your time, no worries.
Too many things on one day. That would be fine with me. Would that be a 5 o'clock meeting or a 6 o'clock meeting? Is it a whatever work session?
Yeah, it would be a regular time, 5.
Okay.
Okay. All right, well, just, maybe Michelle, just so you don't have to make work, the next, when you notice the next meeting, just notice a meeting for the 28th, and isn't it easier to cancel one than to schedule one?
Nope, if it's a special meeting, we only have to notice 3 days in advance. If I notice
Okay.
it, then cancel it, we have to post a cancellation notice.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? All righty, folks. So Carl's already talked to us about next meetings, and so we'll look forward to finishing up on the STRs. So having said that, hearing no other business, I am willing to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second?
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you very much, everybody. It is 6:29 and our meeting is officially adjourned.